The number one reason why you should ever buy a knitting machine is because you might be someone like me who starts off with a light curiosity and buys her first vintage knitting machine and then gets bit by the knitting machine bug and ends up buying all the accessories for that machine. A 3D printed circular sock machine, buying an antique circular sock machine, wanting to make more lace, so I buy a different brand of knitting machine. I now have a Bond vintage sweater machine. I have a 1970s toy version of a circular sock machine, and my most recent acquisition, a bulky gauge knitting machine, which I will be putting together and restoring over the course of this video. So I've warned you, if you get started on the knitting machine journey, you might love it so much that you run out of space for all of the knitting machines and accessories that you're able to find. Today, I thought I'd take a little bit of time to talk about maybe why a knitting machine wouldn't be the best fit for you, and on the other hand, maybe why you should consider getting a knitting machine, and a few little hints to maybe show you a starting point for your knitting machine journey. Now I've made it no secret that the knitting machine is a steep learning curve. So why don't I give you a wonderful compilation right now of all the times where using my knitting machines has gone wrong.
No. Oh my gosh. Ow.
As you can tell, using a knitting machine, at least for me, is not always a relaxing process. There are many times, especially when you're learning a new machine or a new technique or you're trying a new pattern, where using a knitting machine can be quite a headache. It is not super easy, and even if you have significant knitting experience prior, it's still a completely different action. You might understand where stitches have gone wrong, but it's still a machine that you have to learn, and the learning curve is very steep. As a very quick aside, if you're wondering what a knitting machine is, it is literally a machine that does the knitting for you. They were invented in the 1500s to make stockings a lot faster and easier, and they were really big in the 50s and 60s, especially the flat knitting machines for homemade knitwear. My grandmother had one, and she would make sweaters to sell in her village. What I do feel like is a little bit more popular nowadays are the Adi or the Centro circular knitting machines. Have you ever taken a look at a pile of your yarn stash and thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to just jump in it and lay in it and take a nap in it? Well, that takes me to the sponsor of today's video, Birch Living. Birch makes mattresses that are crafted from responsibly sourced materials like organic cotton, organic wool, and 100% natural latex. Their mattresses are free from polyurethane foams, which can cause harmful off-gassing, and are constructed without fiberglass, which is used as a flame retardant in many other mattresses. Instead, the 100% organic wool that Birch uses in their mattresses are naturally flame resistant, and it even helps regulate your body temperature, helping you to stay cool all night. I used to sleep on a foam mattress, and let me tell you, I am waking up much better after sleeping on the Birch mattresses. I fall asleep better, and I feel more well rested when I wake up in the morning. I have to say, I love the bounce and plushness of this particular mattress. It's comfortable for whatever I'm doing, whether I'm reading, knitting, or just actually sleeping. And it helps to know that the mattress is environmentally friendly and free from harmful chemicals, especially something that I'm breathing in and sleeping against all night. With Birch, you'll get a 100-night sleep trial, a 25-year warranty, and free shipping within the United States. Convenience is key for me, so it was really wonderful that the mattress arrived at my front door rolled up in a box. And setup is a breeze, and if you would like some help, they do offer in-home setup and removal. Not only do you get a mattress, but each Birch mattress comes with 2 of their eco-rest pillows made from recycled materials. They're breathable, and I really like how comfortable they are to sleep on. They're the perfect height for me, and I am a combination side and back sleeper. So if you've been thinking about upgrading your sleep, now is the perfect time. Birch's Labor Day sale is live, and you can get 25% off of your Birch mattress, plus 2 free Eco Rest pillows. Just head to the link in the description below or go to birchliving.com/engineeringknits. Thank you so much to Birch for sponsoring today's video and making videos like this even possible. And let's head back to some more knitting machine pros and cons. And to my next point, which is convenience / portability / space requirements. Sure, this lovely knitting machine comes in a carrying case with a handle, but it is really heavy. Even if you want to move your knitting machine around, there are clamps that anchor the knitting machine to the table surface that you're going to be working on. And yes, you definitely do want to use the clamps to anchor your knitting machine down, or else you'll be attempting to knit one way and your machine's gonna fly off the table. Ask me how I know. You might ask, why not use one of those folding tables? Well, I have tried, but I've actually found that modern day folding tables do not fit the size of the vintage clamps. I had to get one custom built for me. I put this the wrong way around. Oh my god. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to take off my sweater in a second because of how sweaty this is making me. Which, by the way, I did actually machine knit the sweater. It's not just the width of the knitting machine, but depending on which one you have, like my brother knitting machines here, further out, it's got wings that extend to the side, moving even further into the room that you're trying to use. Yes, you can assemble it and disassemble it, but if you're like me, when something's disassembled, you're not gonna use it for a while. So I prefer to keep them out and assembled, and that means they use up quite a bit of room. Now, I'm of course currently talking about flat knitting machines. The circular machines tend to be quite a bit smaller. If you want a full circular sock machine, those are a pretty good size. The antique ones can be very, very heavy. Or you might be interested, like I said, in those hat knitting machines, which are a lot more lightweight. A question you might be asking yourself after hearing about all of the different knitting machines that I own is, why do you own so many? And here comes the next semi-downside, I guess, of owning a knitting machine. They are somewhat specialized. My circular sock machines, my CSMs, are literally meant to do just that, knit socks in a circular fashion. Can you knit more than just socks on a CSM? Yes, I have. It was really fun, but it again requires a few different techniques than maybe what the machine was originally intended for. Same with these flatbed knitting machines. Why do I have so many? I want to knit with bulkier and thicker yarn. This machine can really only knit fine lace kind of sport at maximum weight yarns, which is perfect for my vintage knits like this sweater. But most of the knitting yarn that I own is in a heavier weight than that, and I wanted to create some different patterns, and so that required me to get this bulky weight knitting machine. So now between these two knitting machines, I can knit all the way down from incredibly fine yarn to maybe bulky weight yarn, like light bulky weight yarn. So if your goal is to knit down your entire Ravelry library that are full of modern knitting patterns, then I don't know that I can recommend just one knitting machine for you to get that done. Depending on what kind of projects you're looking to make, you might need to buy more than one knitting machine to be able to have the capabilities of making all the different kind of projects that you want to make. And also, I am now stuck on this machine. Okay, there we go. Be careful with your knits around knitting machines because it will grab onto it and repulse it to it. Another word of caution. Another reason why I'm sure many of you, and that includes me, have found it sometimes hard to justify getting a knitting machine is price. The least expensive knitting machines on the market right now, I would say that you can get new, are the Adi and Centro knitting machines. Those you can use to make hats, but like I said, other people have also made like full cardigans and sweaters using those machines, but they still start at like $80-something. They can get into, you know, over $100. So that's, I wouldn't necessarily call that affordable. And don't even get me started on the non-hat machines. If you want to buy one of these flatbed knitting machines new, Silver Reed, I believe, is one of the only remaining manufacturers of flatbed knitting machines that's going to run you in the thousands of dollars. There are replica circular sock machine makers. They're called Erlbacher. Those can be even more expensive. The Dean & Bean is the most affordable that I found of the CSMs. Probably the most affordable is if you have a 3D printer. There are some plans online where you can print that yourself. None of this is particularly affordable. Ow! Oh, Did it catch that? I just dropped a part of the knitting machine onto my own foot and it still hurts. Be careful with these knitting machines. They are unwieldy and they're heavy. They're a lot of fun, but they're unwieldy and they're very heavy. This next bit kind of goes hand in hand with a steep learning curve and the fact that it's expensive to get because there's not many manufacturers left, and so you're just basically left to either buy very expensive ones from the last remaining manufacturer, or you have to go find a vintage machine. One of the reasons why I was so excited to find the Singer knitting machine in the first place is because Silver Reed is basically the modern version of Singer, and so I could find replacement parts. Those modern parts fit with my vintage machine. However, I'm enjoying my brother machines a lot more, and I have antique machines that I love. How do you find replacement parts for that? Basically, my only option right now is that hoping that someone else lists it on eBay, on Etsy, on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist, or I have to cannibalize another machine, which I really don't want to do because I would like to keep as many vintage machines around for other people to use. It's not just the knitting learning curve, but it's also the learning curve of if you get a machine and it's not in perfect working order, how do you fix it? What do you look for? Where do you get your parts? So it's not just the knitting side of it, but it's also the maintenance of a machine side of it. With my antique machines that I have, both my sewing and my knitting machines, I'm actually trying to find a metal fabricator to help me create some pieces that I just can't find anymore so that I can get those machines up and running. At this point, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so these machines are hard to find, especially in good working condition. And if you can find them, they're expensive and the learning curve is steep and they're bulky and hard to store. Why in the world would I ever want to get a knitting machine? Well, mainly, in my opinion, it's because I think that knitting machines are so much fun. If you like machinery like I do, then you might be fascinated with how exactly a knitting machine works. It's really fun to watch the process of it knitting, even the plain stitches of ribbing, if you can get the ribber attachments, color work, lace knitting. It's really cool to figure out how that mechanism is creating the pieces that you're making. So I just find fun in that. If you're maybe not super mechanically inclined, then one of the other reasons that I think most people get knitting machines is that it allows you to create things so quickly. You are just able to tackle problems or go through projects at such a higher rate of speed. I can knit a sweater in a day. And sometimes I want to knit a sweater in a day. Sometimes I want to sit and meditate on a pattern, and other times I'm looking to get things done. For example, my Regency knit dress, there's no way I would have ever attempted to make that by hand. My hands wouldn't last to that. My patience wouldn't last to that. There would be no way that I would even begin to consider doing a project like that, but because I have a knitting machine, it means that I was able to create a beautiful Regency dress made from knitted machine lace. Oh, and one of the things that I kind of forgot to bring up in terms of maybe a slight negative with the knitting machines, I touched on it slightly, and that is that modern knitting patterns can sometimes be hard to translate into a knitting machine, especially a flat knitting machine. Which is why if you like knitting vintage patterns or you're interested in knitting vintage patterns, they are kind of perfectly suited to flat knitting machines, because a lot of times in vintage patterns, you are knitting your sweater in pieces, flat, and then sewing them together, which is exactly what I do on my knitting machine. So I don't have to change anything on my vintage sweater patterns. I just take the patterns as they are and I execute them on my knitting machine. Versus modern sweater patterns, for example, a lot of them are done in the round from the top down, and that requires quite a bit of translation in order for them to work on a knitting machine. So that's another thing to keep in mind. What kind of thing do you want to be able to make with your knitting machine, or do you not really care and you just want to see how a knitting machine goes? If you like vintage and antique things, the flat knitting machines are really good for those. Another good reason to use a knitting machine is if you somehow, for some reason, can't do regular needle knitting anymore, or you need regular breaks from that. For example, for me, I do have a bit of carpal tunnel and other repetitive use injuries in my hands and my forearms, and I really needed to give those a rest for a long while in order to give them a chance to heal. But that doesn't mean my knitting and creative brain stops working. And the urge for me to create and to knit and to make is very, very high. And so these knitting machines allow me to keep creating and making things and knitting things, even if I can't use the fine muscles all the time like I would like to for knitting. And it gives me and my hands a little bit of a break. I'm not saying that it's not easy on your body. I do find that I need quite a bit of strength in my core and some strength in my arms in order to keep the carriage moving left and right, especially if my machine is not properly oiled or if the project is a little bit tight or heavy on the needles. But even if everything is in absolute proper order, like the project isn't super tight on the needles, I don't have that many needles in play, my machine is well oiled, I am still expending core strength and arm strength in order to move the carriage left and right across the needles. It's a little bit easier with a CSM, so the circular sock machines, and I'm assuming also with something like the Centro or the Adi hat machines, because they are a crank, and so you're not expending the energy and the core strength to go this way, rather you're using a hand crank. So that's maybe a little bit easier if you're looking at something that isn't quite as energy intensive, in my opinion. Please do keep that in mind. It's a break for your hands in one aspect, but it does require the movement of your body in others, and it's not a completely weightless movement for the flatbed knitting machines. At least the circular ones might be a little bit easier on your body if you need something that is much lower stress. Something else that I find great about these knitting machines is if you might be a little bit of a yarn stash creator, aka yarn hoarder like me, then you might have more yarn than you could ever hand knit in like 3 or 4 lifetimes. With a knitting machine, however, especially ones that can take regular weight knitting yarn, and by regular I mean more like what is modern day standard versus what is vintage or antique standard, which is a little bit thicker. So again, your Centro, your Adi, your bulky weight flatbed knitting machines, those are going to be able to take those yarns, and then rather than having to wait months for a sweater to be made, you can make one in just a few days. And so you can really work through that yarn stash if you're looking to expeditiously work it down, and then maybe you have an excuse to get even more yarn because now you're working through it a little bit faster. This next pro might be a little bit more niche for those of us who are knitwear designers. For example, I'm currently working on my newest sweater pattern, which is still a vintage sweater pattern, but made hopefully in a wider range of sizes. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to have mine test knit to make sure that the sizing is appropriate and the wording is clear. However, in my first experience of writing a knitting pattern, the test knit was not as smooth as I liked it to be because I realized that there were some sizing issues halfway through the test knit, which I felt was very, very unfair to my test knitters. And so instead, my plan for this next sweater pattern is that I am going to knit up the sizes on my knitting machine first, because again, it's a vintage pattern, so it is perfectly transferable to my flatbed knitting machines, and see how those are working out before I ask my test knitters to knit them. And so my hope is that that process will be a lot smoother this time with a lot less headaches, because I will have already done a bit of a sanity check on all of the sizes before I ask someone else to knit it from my pattern. Another thing might be is that you are maybe a fledgling knitwear designer and you want to create a mini collection of knit pieces. And you could knit them by hand, and I've seen people who list those and knit them by hand, but it is very time consuming and the price can be prohibitive a little bit on the other side because you have to account for all of the hours that you spent hand knitting it. Versus on a machine, you could, if you get good at a particular pattern and you get kind of like, you know, your systems down for that particular pattern of your collection, you could maybe create a sweater a day. That would make it easier for you to create a small knitwear line if you want to. Can you tell that these last few reasons are very specific to the dreams that I have for the future? What do you think? Have I convinced you that a knitting machine is right for you? If not, that's perfectly okay. I hope that you'll still stick around and watch me work on my knitting machines because I think they're fascinating and I try to share them in kind of a fun way. However, if you are interested and you're maybe thinking, I'm not ready to dive in the deep end, so to say, right away, those hat making machines or the circular machines from Ari or Centro are a really good starting point. You can use the yarn that you already have because it's compatible with a lot of different weights of yarn. You can make hats, but also other things if you want to be a little bit more advanced. It introduces you really, really well to the concept of knitting machines and how to operate them so that if you want to take further steps, you at least already have a really, really good introduction to them so that your learning curve isn't quite as steep. It's also much more affordable than some of these flatbed machines or the circular sock machines. And again, affordable is relative. If the new prices are still somewhat steep, then I can highly recommend checking your local listings pages. For me, it's Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist because I see them listed there pretty often for about half the price that they are new, and they look to be in pretty good condition. If you like vintage patterns, especially vintage sweater patterns, and you want to make them on a knitting machine, then I would recommend what's called a standard gauge knitting machine. Those are the ones that I have two of, the Singer and the Brother, and I have made a lot of vintage sweaters on them, basically word for word following the vintage patterns, just doing it on my knitting machines. If you want to do lace work or potentially even color work, so far I have enjoyed my Brother machine better than my Singer machine. The only downside to the Brother machine is that they tend to be a little bit more expensive, at least from what I see online, and they are no longer produced. So if you need a replacement part or if your machine isn't working, it's a little bit harder to get it fixed or to get those replacements because you have to find another vintage machine that is listed or a vintage part that's listed, and those tend to also be very expensive because people know that the inventory is limited. People know what they have. Oh my gosh, and I completely forgot, this just popped into my head. There are knitting machine guilds in many places, at least across the United States, and they hold, in my area, it's monthly meetups. You can show up without your knitting machine if you've never had one before, and you can ask the lovely people there to see if they'll let you try it out. They can teach you. Once you get a knitting machine, you can bring it there, and if you need any help, they're more than willing to help you. The knitting machine guilds are a huge resource. If you don't have one in your area, I have also had luck because I've moved around a lot where I would reach out to the nearest knitting machine guild. It was even states away, but even then they were willing to help me, and sometimes they had meetings over Zoom where again people were discussing things, and even though I couldn't try out knitting machines in person, I could at least see some of them being used. So can recommend checking out if you have a local knitting machine guild, and even if you don't have a local one, check out some other ones that maybe have Zoom meetings if you need some help. I will also list down below the series of YouTube channels that I tend to go to for advice on my knitting machines, whether I need to repair them, I need a pattern, I need to figure out how to cast on, how to cast off, design ideas. So I'll put a list of them in the descriptions for those of you who might be thinking about getting started on your own flatbed knitting machine journey. So what do you think? Will you actually never buy a knitting machine? Or will you maybe take a look and see if a knitting machine is right for you? By the way, the bulky machine that I just set up is in pristine condition. I'm so used to having to do some pretty serious work to getting my new to me vintage knitting machines in working order, but this one is beautiful, and look at the sample that just came off of it. I am so excited to get working with this one. I already have multiple projects in mind for this, and you'll see that very, very soon. So if you like videos like this and you want to see more vintage knitting, antique knitting, knitting machines, more than knitting, crocheting, dressmaking, Regency, all of that, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye. Just like I did a few videos ago, I think I have the energy for another little Q&A session right here like I did last time. As I mentioned before, I have an anxiety when it comes to messaging people and typing responses, so I find it easier to answer some of the questions that I get in this format, and I hope that is okay, and I hope you all are enjoying that. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I have had so much support on my last few videos. You all are so kind, and I've also gotten so much advice, which I really appreciate because I learned so much from you all, and you'll see that in some of the questions that I answer too. So the first one is from Anna Martini Broken Compass, is asking, are you waxing your yarn? I worked in a knitting factory for many years. We went through a lot of paraffin. And no, I am not. However, I did see that another channel, I think it's Knitology 1 by 1, she waxes her yarn, and my newest Brother knitting machine, this one, came with like a little ball of wax that I can put on my tensioner on the knitting machine. So I think I should probably start waxing some of my yarn, and I guess then it might come out if I go through the finishing process, because I don't want my things to be waxy. But that is such a good idea. I want to research that more, and thank you so much. I love when people share their knowledge with me. This is what I mean. You all are the best, and I really appreciate all the advice and information you can give me. The next set of questions kind of concerns the blue knit dress, kind of the navy top, I think some of you were calling it. And yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces at the moment, and Megan7341 came to the rescue. When I saw your comment, my jaw dropped and I ran online to see if you found the exact pattern for this dress, because it is actually the next one that I wanted to make on my knitting machine because I love it so much and I don't want to wear the vintage version out. I want to make a replica that I can wear rather than wearing out the vintage version. This one that I wear in the video is not, I don't think it's handmade, or if it is, it wasn't handmade by someone. I think it was Bear Brand itself sold it. And oh my gosh, it's exactly the pattern. How did you know? How did you find it? There are so many times where I tried to reverse search my vintage pieces that I find to see if I can find a knitting pattern for it. And I would love to know like what your methodology was, or if you just happened to own that book and wanted to knit that pattern. In any case, I might have to do a little bit more crowdsourcing research for the sweaters and dresses that I own, especially the ones that I would like to recreate myself, or maybe expand the sizing in a modern version of a knitting pattern. So that is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. You'll probably see more about it very, very soon. Oh, and of course, if you don't want to wait, I don't even know if I'm going to write up a knitting pattern for this one. I have so many on my to-do list to write up. But if you don't mind knitting against a vintage pattern, then that's the one that you can use. And you can maybe even just knit the top part if you like the top, and you don't have to knit the entire dress. The last question I'll quickly answer is from Burning Diamond. I know your channel is all about knitting and crafting, but can you please make a Nutella video where you have a little Q&A about her, what breed, how old, her favorite treat, toy game, and so on and so forth, please. And you know, that would be my favorite video to make. I would kind of leave it open to you all and let me know what you think. One of the ideas that I have been having is, because I got so much feedback and so much advice from you all on my Regency lace and Regency dressmaking videos, I want to try them out, but I've already kind of finished that dress. But what if I make Nutella, a Regency style dress, using all of the advice that I got from you all in the comments from that one? And maybe I can tie some of the Q&A and give some of the answers in there. And just to answer a few of those questions, she is a mini Australian Shepherd. She is almost 8. She likes any food. If there is food, she will eat it. She's highly, highly, highly food motivated. So I don't think that I could name a favorite, because her favorite is food. She likes any toy that squeaks, and yeah, I can go over more of that in that video if that's something that you all are interested in. Again, I hope that you enjoy this kind of more relaxed, for me at least, format of Q&A. I know I can't answer all of your questions or respond to all of your comments, but I hope that this shows that I do actually read all of them, and I wish that I had a better way of responding, but I hope that this at least answers some of your questions. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye!